Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. On behalf of Pakistan Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, uh, I would like to welcome you on second webinar. And to start the seminar, I would like to request the chairman PPMA for his opening note.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu
alaikum. I'm Tawqir Ullah, Chairman PPMA. On behalf of PPMA, I would like to welcome you all in today's informative session regarding COVID and the different perspective related to it. I would like to acknowledge the efforts of Mr. Harun Qasim from FARMIVO and Dr. Izhar Hussain from Dow University of Health Sciences for arranging and moderating this webinar. Special thanks to our speaker for today, Dr. Hamid Merchant, for sparing his valuable time for imparting such critical information. I strongly believe that these initiatives related to healthcare system define the progress of a country. This year, we faced unprecedented situation in the shape of COVID-19, which severely impacted our personal and professional lives. The pharmaceutical industry of Pakistan played its part in keeping the steady flow of medicines to the patient and made sure that the access remains intact, especially during this particular pandemic. I would like to acknowledge the efforts of the whole pharmaceutical industry on working extensively for the community and the nation as a whole. The pharma industry also took several initiatives like disinfectant drives, free testing, and collaboration with different medical communities to help patients and providing free of cost medicines to COVID centers run by the government. It is the combined effort of the government, industry, and the people of Pakistan that we fought tirelessly with this disease and controlled the spread by taking precautionary measures like use of masks and sanitizers, etc. And we are much better compared to many countries around the world. Now, as we are facing the second wave of COVID, all of us need to be on our toes and respond to the situation effectively by undertaking all the preventive measures suggested by global health organizations like WHO and CDC. Here, I think the role of vaccine will be crucial, and the launch and access of it will be a defining factor in shaping the future way forward for all of us. As the chairman of PPMA, I always encourage the whole industry, and our people are working on it, to play our part and ensure the highest level of quality of medicines we produce, and we will not shy away in ensuring the access of vaccination and healthcare facilities to a common man. In the end, I'm sure that we all will have an informative and insightful webinar today related to the second and the first wave of COVID, current and prospective vaccines and preventive measures, and it will help us all in understanding the situation better and combating the disease together. Thank you very much, and I'm sure we all will be benefited with this webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Tawqir Saab. Thank you very much. You have done most of my job for about the introduction of this webinar. Being the host, it was my duty to say something about the COVID and COVID-19 situation before starting this, asking Dr. Hamid for his presentation and question and answer. Today we are having about 462,000 cases so far, and in Pakistan, the recovery rate is 89%, which is one of the figures which are provided by the ministry. and fatality rate in Pakistan is 2.1%. Allah ka shukar hai. Thanks God for this thing. We have government of Pakistan has allocated about $250 million for vaccine procurement, and they are thinking that by March they are expecting that vaccine to be here in Pakistan. This CanSino biological vaccine is under trial, and about 13,000 volunteers have participated in this seminar. It was started in September 22nd. And I would like to be with between you and Dr. Hamid. I would like to, but before that, before I invite Dr. Hamid, I want to introduce Dr. Hamid. Dr. Hamid is subject lead in pharmacy and course leader for postgraduate suite of pharmacy program in University of Huddersfield. He has over 18 years of experience in pharmaceutical research and development, both from industry and academia. His expertise include novel formulation design, biopharmaceutics, pharmacokinetics, bioavailability, bioequivalence. His clinical knowledge and expertise in pharmaceutical formulation helps in understanding the clinical and therapeutic principles underpinning the science of dosage form uh, for design and developing innovative solutions to improve drug delivery. Dr. Merchant has also contributed significantly to the evidence synthesis of COVID-19 to help safe use of medicine amid pandemic. He also proposed an early therapeutic intervention strategy to help prevent disease progression and control the pandemic as an alternative to vaccine. Before joining Huddersfield, Dr. Hamid has been associated with University College London, where he investigated various technologies for drug delivery into gastrointestinal tract, offered technical support and expert advice to collaborators, clients from academia and industry on various formulations and drug delivery aspects. One of his postdoc assignment at UCL was to develop a formulation for chronic delivery of statins. During this time, during his time at UCL, he has developed novel in vitro solution for the assessment of pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals in physiologically relevant conditions of blood. Dr. Hamid worked with Abbott, Pakistan from December 2002 to 2007 and served in various categories. Dr. Merchant is Fellow of Higher Education Academy, HEA UK, a member of Royal Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain, American Association of Pharmaceutical Scientists, and Controlled Disease Society and Academy of Pharmaceutical Sciences, Great Britain. Dr. Merchant has a pharmacy degree, BPharm, with masters in pharmacy from University of Karachi and a PhD clinical pharmaceutics from University College London. He also has a PGD in quality management from the NED University, Pakistan, and postgraduate certificate in higher education from Huddersfield. So over to Dr. Hamid, and I please update us about your findings about the COVID and COVID vaccine. What is the current situation with COVID and how does the number of cases and mortality compares to the first wave? And when do you think the pandemic is likely to end?
Thank you very much, Dr. Izar, for a very long and thorough introduction. And thank you for the PPMA chairman and all the other participants who have come in today to listen to the talk. I would like to share my screen to show you some trends and data. Meanwhile, I'm discussing about it. If you could kindly allow me to share my screen, please. It's not allowing me to share my screen. If you could enable me to share my screen, please.
अब check कर लें आ रहा?
Yes, that's brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you. Right. So currently, the world situation with coronavirus is alarming. As you could see, this is the last night update from John Hopkins. All these hotspots you can see on the world map, the COVID hotspots around the world. So you can clearly see it's still pretty much dominating the world. It's still a peace situation. We haven't come down to the pandemic yet. There are about more than 77 million cases now for the confirmed COVID, and it has costed us about 1.7 million lives across the world. Some of the biggest numbers as of today we have got in US, India, Brazil, Russia, France, United Kingdom. Similarly, the number of deaths on these sides. But bear in mind that these are the actual figures, and they're not corrected or normalized with the population data. Sometimes when you correct them with the population density, you might see a different trend. But this is the actual raw data without any processing, and the situation doesn't look very good. If you look at the United States in a bit more closer look, you can see the first wave around the April around here, and the second wave in the US was around the summer. And now we are almost in the third wave in the United States, and that's very significant in terms of numbers. But some of the numbers in the first wave is low, just because it was a new disease at that time, and the number of tests available at that time for the general population wasn't very widespread. The availability of the test has been improved quite a lot over the period of time, which has made sure that we pick up all the positive cases. So probably the higher number down the year also indicates the availability of tests and ability to test people in the masses. But if you look at the deaths ratio, the third wave, which is more realistic picture of the damages caused by the disease, you can still see that the third peak in the US is quite significant, and is going down to the same number of deaths as you have seen in the first wave, and in some cases is even going above of the death ratios in the first peak. In Pakistan, these are the official figures from the government being reported to WHO, and we have got at least 460,000 cases reported so far, with about 9,000 or so deaths reported in the country. Still, you could see a second peak quite visible in the country. There was a mild, kind of September maintenance of the disease here, and then the death graph also shows a significant rise in the second peak, which makes people worried that the second wave has caused a lot more damage, and the country has to take it more seriously than before. If you look at the UK situation, we also had our first wave around the April time, with the largest number of cases reported around that. But again, our ability to test the population was very limited. We couldn't even test people until 14 days of isolation. And if the symptoms persisted, then we were offering tests at that time. And then our testing capacity was significantly increased. There was a national lockdown, and then summer was good. And then after the summer, we had another peak which started to rise. We had another national lockdown which decreased this load, and then we opened the country up again in different tier systems, and then you can see clearly another peak now coming to the country. So we have at least 2 million confirmed cases in UK, and on daily basis we are at least seeing about more than 30,000 new cases every day. So it is massive. And in terms of the death tolls, we had the highest number of damage caused by the virus in the first peak in the April time, and we had quite a good period around the summer. But then the second peak has caused a lot of problems in terms of mortality as well. So we have so far recorded about around just below 80,000 deaths in the country so far. So if you look at the case numbers, UK case number looks very high, but bear that in mind that country, we're doing at least 400,000 tests every day on patients. So more you test, more chances as that you will find the disease, and then the case number are going to look really very high. But at the same time, the death tolls is just something which is more worrying for us in the country here. If you look at the geographical distribution of the disease in the UK, we have got quite a high incident recently in the south, and this is the heat map just from last night. And the darker colors you can see in the south represents more number of cases per 100,000 population. So previously in the after September, October, November period of time, the north was showing a darker representation, which attracted north on a more stricter lockdown period. So we had a regional lockdown, pretty much level 3, since the second national lockdown ended, and Yorkshire, Humber, and those regions never got out of it. But the south was relaxed to tier 2 conditions after the national lockdown, and that mainly responsible for a high number of surges in these areas. But what the more concerning situation with us in UK, the way we look at it, is our ability to provide healthcare, our ability to provide people the life support, our ability to treat people who can be treated with the disease. So we can see that the mortality rate is still low, and majority of patients are recovering from the disease, and that's because of the quality of care they receive in the hospitals, and we were able to rescue their lives. But currently the situation in the hospital is we have got about 18,000 COVID patients currently as we speak admitted to the hospitals, and that's a huge pressure. You can see the first peak we had is in the summer, and then we had a second peak. We couldn't reduce it much, and then we're going up again, which is worrying because the pressure on the NHS and the health services is worrying. If we can't treat people, if we can't accommodate in hospitals, that's all going to rise again. If we're going to go up again. If you look at the people who are in critical care and requiring ventilator support, still we have got about 1,300 people on ventilators in UK, and mortality rate in ventilator people is very, very high. 1 out of the 2 normally doesn't survive who go onto the ventilator as we speak today. So the situation is harsh, and what we want to do is protect these people going to that stage, which is why the restrictions are still in place in the country. It's troublesome, it's painful, but the main reason, I think, the way I see it, is the pressure on the healthcare system. So the next question you asked was I think when the pandemic will end, if I heard it correctly. It's a difficult question to answer, and there are lots of speculations around this in terms of how and when the pandemic will end. But this is one of the model which we are using in many countries to predict the herd immunity, and the thresholds for herd immunity are around 60%. And there are different models which are trying to calculate when we can hit that target. So this one particularly in the US, but a similar approach is used in some countries. And in the graph, you can see the purple shaded area at the bottom represents the people who have infected with the disease. So theoretically, all those people infected should have got some immunity. And the blue shaded areas are those where the immunity has been produced by the vaccination. So vaccination is already rolled out and is being planned at a more massive scale in January in the US. And you would expect that that graph will go up because of the social distancing and control measures in place. You expect that less people will get infected, but the vaccine will provide that immunity. And then by the summer 2021, the prediction is you should be able to achieve thresholds for the herd immunity, which would allow the country to get out of these situations. But similar prediction is done in other countries. But the question is, what if this purple shaded area doesn't provide the enough immunity, and you might have to provide more passive immunization or active immunization through vaccination to get that bar. And that's depending on the mathematical modeling being used and presumptions and assumptions in the model. So it's difficult to project, but this is what currently the governments are working on. To understand the flu and the pandemic cycles, if I take you back in the First World War time, in 1918 Spanish flu, this is the data from United Kingdom. And on the x-axis, you can see the timelines. So this is June 29, the summer in 1918, where the UK has recorded highest number of deaths in the country with the Spanish flu. The wave died down quite quickly, but it came back again around the winter time. The second peak in winter was more aggressive, and it claimed more deaths around the country. It died down again in January, February time, and then we had another wave around the spring. And then it took about 2 years for the pandemic to die down. Considering in those times the world was not that socially connected as we are connected today, the more number of people flying around, the travel is more easier than in those days. But there was something happening which allowed people to mobilize from one geographical area to other geographical area very quickly, and that was the World War. And World War had a large role to play in massive communication and importation of the virus from one country, one geography to another geography. Well, that's the lifespan of a pandemic, which was massive, which was global, and we have seen this as a devastating situation in the past. The flu virus, which caused the Spanish influenza pandemic, never left us. If you look at the United Kingdom Public Health Surveillance Report, you have flu virus outbreaks, particularly H1N1, which kept mutating over the years. It came back, it keeps coming back every year. And the other one, H3N2, was another variant which came in and caused the flu. So there were two different types of variants which keeps coming, one from the swine mutated version, the other one from the avian or the bird flu mutated versions. So you can see the Euromoma model, which predicts and compares the actual mortality, all-cause mortality related to the influenza in United Kingdom only. And you can see you've got H3N2 peaks, sometimes you've got H1N1 peak, and in 2021, we are again predicting H1N1 to come back in the country, and that makes disease more complicated. So looking at the pandemic, the virus, has shown to stay in the community. It doesn't really leave. It does mutate and it comes around. It doesn't cause a very high mortality as it caused in 1918 outbreak, but it does affect a minority vulnerable population every year. The recently in summer, we've been reported a new H1N1 variation being developed in China, and that's been seen as a threat in this winter season as well. If this virus comes around and starts infecting people along with the COVID virus, the combination infection going to be a lot more dangerous and lethal. So currently in 2021 season, we have got at least 6 different products for flu immunization in the country, which which includes H1N1 and H3N2 immunization. And the idea is to provide as much as immunity we can to the vulnerable populations in the country so we can minimize the impact the COVID-19 will have in the country. So we've been doing this, and apart from Spanish flu, we had a major outbreak of bird flu in 1997, then swine flu in 2009, 2010. We've got SARS outbreak in 2002 to 2004, and that has been, again, a major concern for the global community, leading to a more regional epidemic in Middle East, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome in 2014, and then COVID in almost at the end of 2019, 2020. So we have got a history of these pandemics to compare with, and we can see what their life cycle was and learn from those pandemics, see how long they persisted in the society before they disappeared. So if you look at the MERS situation in the country, it has never left us. This is the WHO surveillance data. It has never completely eradicated. It still sits around areas. And in 2015, when it emerges in Korean region, it started to spread around. And these restrictions, testing, isolations, shielding measures in the countries have been proven to control the disease to become a pandemic. But it's never left us, the SARS-CoV-1, if you like. If you look at the coronavirus history, the human coronaviruses are not new in the society. There are at least 4 different types of human coronaviruses, which we already know for about many years. And these 4 coronaviruses is called mild infection of respiratory tract, which is very similar to flu. And normally it doesn't endanger people's life. But the most dangerous coronavirus we have seen, which has caused a pandemic level threat, was SARS-CoV-1, and followed by another coronavirus which caused Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, which is also a coronavirus, and then the SARS-CoV-2, which has caused that particular disease. So coronaviruses are not new. They are in the society for long. And many of you might have not remembered the Nipah virus outbreak in Malaysia, which was very regional outbreak in the Malaysia in 1999. And that virus was also transmitted from bats. So lots of people have forgotten about that. But Nipah virus name came from a village in Malaysia where the outbreak started. And it was quite an interesting case study where the people who were dying were non-Muslims, and the country was trying to find out what's happening, why the outbreak is particularly located in the regions of the country where non-Muslim population was. And then with the help of the science and technology, they were able to identify that the disease is coming from pigs, and that's what causing the non-Muslim population to get in contact with the virus, which is causing the disease. When they digged it down further, they found again the bat coronavirus type of variation, which was named Nipah virus, contaminated the pigs, and it came from the bats, and then was a big threat to the country. But the Malaysian government at that time took very bold decisions, very strong steps, and tried to control this virus, and eradicated the whole population of pigs from the country to control the disease. This was a very difficult time in the country, particularly for some populations who were being affected around the area. This is not just the only outbreak we have seen. If you dig down further in the history, the other bats, particularly the bats in Indian continent, including in Pakistan and South India particularly, which lives around the trees. These fruit bats are quite an interesting carrier of coronaviruses. And in those days, in early 2000s, there were some children being admitted to the South Indian hospitals with a meningitis kind of infection, which was viral, but the doctors were surprised the way it affected the brain, and the patients were dying very quickly. So this particular outbreak was related to a coronavirus again, came from fruit bats, and these viruses would target again your respiratory system, but then go straight to your brain. and they were very dangerous coronaviruses. And the way it got contaminated was that those bats live around the trees. They are part of the normal ecosystem in the South India. They are responsible for pollination, production of the fruit, and they've never been seen as harmless bats. But when they live around the trees, sometimes they leave their wastes around the fruits, and often the children climb up the trees and kind of consume those raw fruits without washing them properly, and that caused a fruit contamination from the bats in those village areas in the south, and some children were severely affected and some adult population as well. But this was a localized issue, was never converted into a pandemic. But same coronavirus seems to jump this time, instead of pigs, into camel, and caused the Middle East epidemic, which was the MERS pandemic, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and that spread out in 2015 in South Korea. So these coronaviruses has a long history of infecting animals and then jumping from animals to humans. And there's another pandemic which people don't talk much about, is 2016 coronavirus pandemic in piglets in China. And this has affected thousands of piglets, baby pigs. About 36,000 baby pigs died with that disease. But their mothers were immune, their fathers were immune. All the adult pig population was immune in the same pig farms. Only babies were dying because they did not had the they did not had the immunity in their system against these coronaviruses. But interestingly, we found that in the pig farms where the mother sows were feeding piglets, the immunity was passed on and those piglets were surviving. But majority of piglets in the farms cannot get the mother milk. They've been fed on artificial diet, which is where the immunity wasn't passed on and many piglets died. And this was led to a huge segregation, quarantine of baby piglets, the culling of baby piglets, and separating that stock from there. And this was quite close to the 2019 outbreak in China, which again caused by another coronavirus variation. So coronaviruses, bats, and the infections in animals and humans has a long history to study, and many phylogenetic scientists and the scientists researching on viruses in animals and viruses which jump from animals to humans are researching these areas. Some genetic scientists are trying to find the genetic correlations between different pandemics to see how these diseases emerges, to better understand them and try to prevent them for the future. So you might think about, we haven't got this problem in Pakistan. Chinese people eat all dodgy stuff and it's only about China. No, it could come in, as you've seen in India, where nobody consumes bats, but the other variety of bats could cause a severe issue. There are at least 4 species of bats who live in Pakistan, and found this interesting book published about the bat species in Pakistan, which might provide you some interesting background to the problem. The Indian flying fox were one of the type of the bats which caused the South Indian carrier of the coronavirus, causing a severe brain infection. More recently, if you look at the last month, 5th of November, we're not going too far away, there was another mutant variation of coronavirus identified in Denmark, and that has affected minks. So mink farming is very saturated in Denmark region. They got about 1,000 mink farms. It's part of the fur farming, the fabric fur we get from animals. And the variant was very dangerous, and there was threats to the vaccination at that time, and the government decided to finish off entire population of mink farming in the country to eradicate the threat it could have posed to the mutation. And this raised various other questions about animal farming for commercial goods, particularly fur farming, and various animal activists are now talking about the very basic nature of these kind of industry existing, and trying to switch on to more natural form of fabrics, which would be more safer and more humane to the animal population. So there's an article I wrote in May talking about coronavirus and when the pandemic will finish. And my view was early on in the pandemic that the coronavirus will stay with us forever. It's not going to go away. So looking at the history, it doesn't look like it will disappear. We will be able to manage it. We will control it. The pandemic will disappear, but the virus will stay with us forever. It will be part of our ecosystem. It will keep coming back like a flu incident, and there might be an annual vaccination program to control the seasonal coronavirus outbreaks in the future. I think it's a long answer to your question, but I've tried to give you a historic perspective and go around and explain you in that.
हामिद साहब, मैंने आपसे छोटा सा क्वेश्चन किया था, आपने इतना लंबा इसका जवाब दिया. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There is, I would like to tell the audience that please keep on posting their questions on chat box, and we will try to take care of most of the questions as with our limited time. But if we cannot address to any of those questions, we will answer them, and the answer will be posted on PPMA website. So this is one of the. आप लोग अपने सवालात जो है वो चैट बॉक्स पे भेज दें. कोशिश हमारी ये होगी कि हम सारे सवालों का जवाब दें, लेकिन अगर वक्त की वजह से कुछ सवालों का जवाब नहीं दे सके तो उनको हम पीपीएमए की वेबसाइट के ऊपर इसकी जो समरी उसके जो हम उस पर पोस्ट करेंगे इस सेमिनार को, इसका टेक्स्ट वर्जन पोस्ट करेंगे, उसमें उनको हम एड्रेस करेंगे. ठीक है. थैंक यू वेरी मच. Our next question is, how is the current situation with vaccine? The vaccine has been started to roll out in UK and USA and China. Can you explain how many types of vaccines are there and how do they actually work to prevent from the disease? And also address about the plasma therapy and the passive immunization which is being done across the world.
Thank you very much, Izar Saab, and that's again a very important question. Let me load my PowerPoint again so I could share some data around that to explain the question in the detail. Can you see my screen? क्या आप मेरी screen देख सकते हैं?
Yes, we can see your screen.
That's brilliant. So first, I'll start from how the vaccine works first before I try to explain what the current situation with the vaccine is, and as you asked the question about the type of vaccines, immunization stuff. So normally what happens is when you naturally catch an infection, you fall ill, and your immune system starts to respond against that pathogen which is causing the disease. It could be a virus, it could be a bacteria or another disease-causing organism. Your immune system fights with the infection, and in most cases, immune system wins, and then you get the immunity. That immunity helps you to prevent the recurrence of the disease, and you keep it with you for a period of time. The naturally acquired immunity usually lasts longer. We have seen that people take it, but there's a risk if the disease hits you hard. Your body might struggle to survive from the disease. You might have got a severe hospitalization, loss of quality of life. Maybe some people die with the disease as well. So the alternative approach in the world is to have a vaccine. So you take a vaccine, you get minor symptoms of the disease. Vaccine will expose you to the same antigen present in the actual disease-causing virus or the bacteria. You get the minor symptoms of the disease because your immune system is fighting against those, pathogen looking like injected stuff. Then your immune system responds, you get the immunity, and then you keep it. Some vaccines provide you short-term immunity, you need a booster dose, and you then carry on further. Coming back to coronavirus vaccines, so there are different types of vaccines in the world. So the first one we are known about is the live attenuated vaccine. In the live attenuated vaccine, we have got different examples like MMR, rubella, rotavirus, smallpox, and so on, including oral poliovirus vaccine. These vaccines contains live bacteria or virus causing the disease, but those live viruses are attenuated. That means they've been weakened down, so they do not cause a severe disease. So they are purposely injected into the body, and they provide an immune response. You have the immunity, you keep it, and sometimes you need to have a booster doses. But the advantage of the live attenuated vaccine is that the immunity lasts longer. It's a very powerful immune response because it's a very strong live pathogen injected into your body. Inactivated vaccines for those viruses which after inactivation also produce a good immune response. You don't have to endanger by taking a live vaccine. Examples include hepatitis, the flu jabs, the polio, and the rabies. These contains inactivated, completely inactivated organism. So that organism cannot cause the disease, but because it is still a pathogenic organism, the body sees it as a threat and causes the disease. You also have subunit vaccine. These are the vaccines which has been produced by taking a part of the virus or bacteria. So it could be a polysaccharide, it could be the spike protein, it could be the part of the genetic structure. So it could be any part of the bacteria or the virus taken in, which has got immunogenic potential, which body can see as a threat and then produce an immune response. There are some examples for those vaccines in them already. Some vaccines we have got are toxoid vaccines. So some organisms doesn't cause damage themselves, but they produce some toxins which cause damage. For example, diphtheria, tetanus. So the vaccines have got a different style in those ways. The vaccine target the toxins rather than the actual organism causing the disease, and they're called the toxoid vaccines. And the new category of vaccine being introduced quite recently is called genetic vaccines, which contains the genetic code, either DNA or part of the DNA called capsid DNA or short interference or messenger RNAs, or we have the viral vector vaccines, which are pretty much engineered laboratory viruses. So having a closer look to the COVID vaccine, what kind of COVID vaccines we have got now and what's coming in near future, which are in clinical phase 3 evaluation. So the first category of vaccines which have been on the front runner and been out in the market are the genetic vaccines, which includes two further subtypes, messenger RNA vaccines and viral vector vaccines. I'll explain to you about those in a moment. The other one is a conventional vaccine, which is either a whole inactivated virus or a split virion or a part of a virus. For example, the spike proteins in many cases being used, or a whole purified spike protein or part of the spike protein in some cases. So mRNA vaccine, which is one of the popular vaccine now we have in United Kingdom and the US. So how does it work? So what it does basically, so this vaccine is taking the spike protein. So for example, the one on the coronavirus. So the scientist has taken this spike protein and understood the genetic code for that spike protein, and then coded the instructions of that spike code proteins in an RNA, which is genetic code, and that code can be translated into preparing the proteins by our body cells, our machineries. So for example, if you're cooking something, you need a recipe, right? When you have a recipe, then you can cook that thing. Similarly, in our biology, in our body require a recipe in the coded function called our DNA or a part of messenger RNA, which is very specific instruction to cook a particular dish, for example, the spike protein. And that spike protein is then encapsulated into a lipid coating. And that lipid coating is being produced by different fatty acids and some lipids to create this bilayer membrane. So it becomes like a cell. So this is like an artificial virus, if you like. So if you look at this original virus, it has got this spike proteins around and lipid capsid and then the genetic code inside. But this is the full DNA of the virus. But what we have done is manufactured this lipid coating around the messenger RNA only part of the codons, which can only produce these spike proteins. And then we encapsulated this into this lipid coating. So that's the formulation trick. And that trick has been done by formulation guys for 20, 30 years in nanotechnology. People have been developing solutions around this for a long period of time. So this becomes like a artificial acting virus. And then what happens? You inject this into the body as a vaccine. This goes into your muscles. And then this vaccine particle goes into your healthy cells of the muscles and then starts to go inside. When it goes inside, the genetic material is released inside the cell, and then your cell machinery, your body's own tissues, starts producing spike proteins. These spike proteins comes out of the cell, and then immune systems see this as a threat. And there are two types of immune response you would expect. One is the cellular level response, which is T cell response. The other one is a more humoral response, which produces antibodies against these kind of activity in the body. So these antibodies will then destroy these cells, and all these injected material being produced into the body. So your cells start producing these spike proteins, but these spike proteins your cells produce are not the real virus. So you have no danger of getting the disease, but your body thinks, oh, something came in, an invasion, and an immune system kicks in. These genetic approach provide a very strong immune response, almost immediate response, and potency and efficacy is really very high because you play with the genetics, and these cells within your own body that attract a very strong immune response. And this is the mechanism behind Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, particularly, which we are now talking about. The other vaccine, which is very important, again, front runner, is the viral vector vaccine. What happens in the viral vector vaccine is, again, you take the coronavirus and then you purify the genetic code for the spike protein. Again, you've got the messenger RNA or the genetic code. But instead of putting it into a artificial lipid membrane, you put it into an actual virus. Now, that actual virus is a carrier virus, which in this case is for COVID vaccine is adenoviral vector. Now, adenovirus is a virus which is normally found in our nose. It causes a very mild kind of cold in winter seasons, and our body is used to of these viruses for a long period of time. They're not really a potential threat to the human body. So scientists use this adenoviral vector as a carrier to carry this genetic code instead of that artificial lipid membrane coating. So this particular combination then, in other words, is a laboratory engineered virus. It's a real virus because it is a viral carrier, but it's been modified to have a particular genetic code inside, which we wanted, rather than the actual code of adenoviral vector. So this virus goes into your body. Again, you inject it in. This virus starts infecting your cells. Bodies see this as a threat, and bodies start producing antibodies against this. So you get a very strong immune response again, very powerful, potent response. And some of the examples of these kind of vaccines is AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, or Janssen Cilag Johnson Johnson vaccine, or CanSino Bio, which you've been talking about in Pakistan. So these vaccines work from this premise. There are many conventional vaccines for coronavirus, which is being either in clinical trials or been coming out now for regulatory approvals. One of the vaccine is from a US company called Novavax, and that uses a subunit of the spike protein, which is encapsulated again in a nanoparticulate system. So they do not contain any genetic code. This one do not contain any DNA, but just the spike protein itself. That spike protein, which is present on the top of the coronavirus, when it goes inside your body, It produces an immune response and you get the immunity. The beauty of this particular vaccine is that it's adjuvanted as well. So in the past, we have seen some people with a poor immune system response, people who are immunocompromised, or elderly people who are naturally, weaker immune system. They don't respond to the immune stimulus, to the traditional vaccine techniques. And because Novavax uses a classic conventional vaccine approach, so the chances was that the maybe immune system would not react in many cases, which is why the efficacy of these kind of vaccines are normally low. So what they've done, they've made an adjuvanted vaccine, which means they've got an immune booster inside, which will activate your immune system, which will wake them up, kind of thing. So you get a better response from the vaccine. Adjuvanted technique is not new. It's been in the vaccines for a long period of time. A flu vaccine, which we normally recommend in UK for 65 plus people, is also adjuvanted vaccines. It's a safe technology used before in other vaccines. Another vaccine which has been rolled out is Valneva vaccine. Production already started in United Kingdom. It's a part of the Scotland, and it's a French company, and it also uses an inactivated whole virus to produce immunity. Another popular vaccine is Medicago's COVID spike protein, which is being adjuvanted by GSK adjuvant immune stimulant again. The technique uses similar approach as Novavax, but it's a different formulation style to design these viral-like particles. So Medicago is viral-like particles. Novavax is a nanoparticulate-based technology having a subunit spike protein encapsulated inside. There is another inactivated vaccine from China, from Sinovac, and that's also inactivated vaccine, which does not use any genetic code. There is another one which is from Sinopharm, and these are two different companies, but similar approach. Both are inactivated vaccine. So Sinopharm and Sinovac. So picture in UK, the United Kingdom government has ordered many vaccines. The biggest order they placed was Oxford and AstraZeneca vaccine. The Valneva one, we have got Novavax, GSK, BioNTech, Pfizer, Janssen, and Moderna. So Moderna, which has been the Pfizer one, which has been just rolled out, the Moderna coming next, is only about 45 million units. But the many other vaccines going to come into the UK, which will provide a major chunk of contribution to the immunization process. Some of these numbers are recently been changed because Oxford vaccine has got delayed because of the recent issues with the clinical trial, and they've been going to further confirmatory clinical trials, which is why the government might have ordered some of the vaccines in more quantities to compensate the loss. So the numbers are slightly changed now currently since this graph was produced by the BBC. So I think I've answered your question again in a long way. So over to you, Asaf, again. I think we've got very short time left, so I'll try to speed up a bit and not go into much details, but if there were questions, I can take later.
There is another question which comes up with after your detailed explanation of vaccines. That what is the history of genetic vaccines? Are genetic vaccines are artificial vaccines? And how and what kind of vaccines ever used before human beings? And COVID vaccine was developed. Is this vaccine can be developed so quickly, because vaccines sometimes take longer time to develop. So, and the efficacy of these vaccines can be claimed 95% within this short span of time of experimentation. Over to you.
A very important question, and again, these are the common questions people are asking about and worried about. And to understand the history of genetic vaccines, we need to go a little bit back into gene delivery. So gene delivery is not something new. It's been attempted since 1980s. So COVID vaccine were designed on the back of the gene delivery approach. So what we are trying to do in COVID vaccine is taking a genetic code to manufacture a particular protein, which is found in, say, coronavirus top, and then inject this into the body's own cells. So our cells start producing coronavirus protein, and our immune system reacts to get the immunity. Now that approach was used in 1980s. It's a very old, 40 years old research. And the idea was that many diseases are genetic disorders where people have got genetic defect. Now their life is in misery. They will not live long. The life they have will be full of poor quality, and the medications are not really effective. They only are on symptomatic medications. And the only way to cure those people was to correct that genetic defect. So if somebody is born with a genetic defect, the only way to cure that is to correct that defect. And there are some examples of these rare genetic diseases, but there's not an all-exclusive list. There are plenty of other genetic disorders, rare disorders, where the gene delivery approach is being used. So the idea was to inject the right genetic code to correct your genetic deficiency, and then you cure from the disease. But in 1980s, mostly the viral vector was used, and non-viral vector wasn't popular at that time because people thought that viral vector will be more easier, more effective in carrying the genetic code, because viruses multiply very quickly in the body, and they will multiply the correct gene into the body and then correct the defect. But in 1999, there was an incident where a teenager with a rare hepatic disorder died with this approach. And that caused a lot of controversy around genetic approach to the diseases and gene delivery therapies. And there was a lot of problems afterwards. The science was, in a difficult time at that time. And then there was a notion to go for a non-viral vector, like Moderna and Pfizer used in COVID approach. So non-viral vectors, they thought, do not have a virus, so technically they will not have same problems. These kind of approaches carried on since over the 40 years period. There were a few more deaths in the gene delivery approach in some rare cases where you're talking about a genetic disorder, and that specific population is very different to a healthy population. And then about last, say, 5-10 years ago, the similar technology was adopted to address the world's biggest issues like Ebola, Zika, HIV, dengue, and also COVID. So the approach is there for 40 years. It's been in scientific research and development. It's not really a very new approach, but it's been adopted for the viruses quite recently. But many of you might not know that in 2019, Merck received the approval from FDA for its first Ebola vaccine, and that is a genetic vaccine, exactly same as COVID vaccine is being prepared now. And in July 2020, Johnson & Johnson and Janssen received their approval of Ebola vaccine. While we were so busy with COVID, this was also happening. And Janssen Cilag and Johnson & Johnson has also submitted their paperwork to European Medical Agency for approval of their SARS-CoV-2 or COVID vaccine. So that approval or decision might come very soon. It's under review at the moment. So we have at least 2 vaccines using same genetic approach designed for Ebola. So it's not very new. It's been tested in individuals. One of the issue with Ebola vaccine was that the immunity died down after six months kind of thing. And there was a discussion about how you would have carried on that immunity. Would your cellular response would remember that? Would the T cell response compensate for the loss of humoral immunity? Or you might get another booster maybe afterwards if you needed to sustain that immunity. But Ebola vaccine is one example there. The next question was on vaccine efficacy. I'll try to address this very quickly. So far, the data submitted to the regulatory authorities shows a very strong evidence that the vaccine efficacy is 95%, and compared to the placebo, and it's statistically significant, clinically relevant. But when we dig down further details about how the real world efficacy of the vaccine going to be like, then there are about 7 points I've raised about the real world efficacy. So I've tried to explain why the real world efficacy would not be as good as 95%, and it would be around, say, maybe is same as the flu virus vaccine, for example. So if the clinical trial will carry on for 2 years, the real world efficacy will go down, and there are many reasons to that. But in the interest of time, I'll skip that. If you need to read more, there's a reference down there. You can have a look. So in terms of the vaccine safety, then which is the next obvious question is it safe? Okay, should you take it? So this information comes from the the regulatory approved information leaflet, which has been distributed to the UK participants who are taking the vaccine. So this is the official information coming from Pfizer, which has been approved by the regulatory body to be provided to the vaccine participants. So if you were allergic to the vaccine, if you had any reaction in the past to any of the ingredient in the vaccine, you should not take it. This is the kind of instructions in the vaccine information leaflet. The other potential issues and warnings being given is a weakened immune system. So if your immune system is being modulated and affected by HIV, or you are in an immunosuppressant medications, you have bleeding problems, and you got all those issues, then you might want to speak to your doctor before you take the vaccination. So you might be at a risk if you take this particular vaccine. So these warnings and cautions are specific to that genetic vaccines from Pfizer, and it might be replicated to other genetic vaccines, but it would not apply to the other vaccines. It's very specific information. Or more, it's not indicated for anyone less than 16 years of age, and there is a very limited data on pregnant women. So the safety and efficacy in pregnant women is not known as yet. So if you were breastfeeding, or if you're planning to have a baby, or you're already conceived, then you should think about it. There is some precautions about the ability to drive. So if you feel like your attention is being affected after taking the vaccine, then you should not drive or operate heavy machinery until you are sure that you're not affected. So side effects. So very, very common side effect, which has been reported in the clinical trial, which is say less than 1 in 10 people are these, and they're very mild side effect. And these side effects normally happen with any vaccine, so they're not really worrisome. The uncommon side effect is enlarged lymph nodes around, for example, feeling unwell, which is again manageable side effects. They're not really something to worry about. But the major side effect which we have seen is anaphylaxis, and there are 2 cases of anaphylaxis seen in UK out of about 500,000 injections we have done so far, and 6 more cases reported in the US out of about more than 100,000 vaccinations they've done so far. So it's rare, it's very rare, and it's observed in those people who normally have a very hyperactive immune system, or they have got severe allergies, and normally those patients would know them that they have got these, so they should avoid taking the vaccines, and they should always take their EpiPens with them in case if they've got a severe reaction, they could use the antidote to save lives. To report side effects, MHRA has particularly launched a special COVID surveillance program, and this yellow card scheme online allows the patient to report their side effects themselves. Pakistani government, along in the DRAP, the Drug Regulatory Authority, has collaborated with MHRA in UK and recently launched an app for reporting side effects, which is available in Android and iOS platforms. I would encourage everyone to download that, and you can help regulatory bodies to collect the side effect data and the safety of vaccines as the immunization carries on. So it's the link at the bottom here if you wanted more information. So potential risk group, which we can think of, apart from what's been officially disclosed, is thinking of, this particular vaccine on the top is the engineered vaccine, like the Oxford or AstraZeneca vaccine. This one is the, again, genetic vaccine from Pfizer or Moderna, where you've got this lipid bilayer vesicle, like a nanoparticular delivery system, and this is the engineered virus. In both cases, what do is you initiate a response by your body to produce the viral proteins. Now, you rely on immune system to produce that immune response. And relying on immune system means that immune system not only is producing antibodies and giving you the immunity, but you're also relying on immune system to clear that mess, because vaccine has initiated this response. It infected your cells are now multiplying, they're producing viral proteins, and you need to stop that process. And to stop that process, you need to have a healthy immune system to knock it down. So there is a risk populations where the immune system is not good, and there is a history of either a very deficient immune system or very hyperactive immune system, because this particular vaccine has got double immunity. So the adenoviral will also be attacked by the immune system. The genetic code is infecting your healthy cell, and your healthy cells are multiplying and becoming abnormal cells, and that's also attracting immune response. You get double immune response. So you need to have a good immunity to clear this mess. And if your immune system is not working properly, if you got HIV, AIDS, immunocompromised, if you're taking anti-cancer medication, immunosuppressants, and all those kind of things, then you might think about the safety and speak to your doctor about this. And particularly people who might have got history of malignancies in the past, who might have got past cancers or current cancers, their ability of cellular immunity to finish off the abnormal looking cells is compromised, and there's a history of this compromised apoptosis process or phagocytosis process, and then there's a risk of that your body immune system might not react how a healthy person would, and that's a caution here for that population. So over to you, Asab, again. I'm sorry it's long. I've given a long answer, but I felt it's important to explain the science behind it so people understand these answers properly.
So now I am shifting from my own question bank to the questions coming from the audience. The first question is from Dr. Farooq Malik, and he asked following the second variant coming from the British Health Minister, how does this impact COVID-19 pandemic control measures within the continent and beyond? It was about the second variant of the COVID-19. And the Dr. Saab is asking for how does this impact COVID-19 pandemic control measures within the continent and beyond?
Thank you very much, Farooq, for the interesting question. I might want to share again my screen to explain the response. So if you look at the viral mutation, right? So viral mutation is something which is so common and so abrupt that so far thousands of mutations has been reported, and these mutations have been reported since the virus came from its outbreak. So it's not now. The mutations are there. Some mutations are minor, and some mutations become major. So when a virus achieves a multiple mutation in one cycle, or retains previous mutations and makes more mutations and then carried on to the other population subgroups, then that cluster of virus mutations becomes so important that it's been deviated significantly from previous mutation. So this was a study published in recently in Proceedings for National Academy of Science, PNAS, and this has looked at all the mutation across the world. So thousands of mutation database they have looked at, and what they've done is, based on the major mutation, they have classified the virus into 6 categories. So if you look at the world and the UK surveillance data, you can see the category 6 virus was dominating the world until now, until say September time period, at least most of the summer. And this was not bad because disease was spreading fast, but we have seen the mortality went down. So the previous variants of the virus perhaps were more dangerous or caused more fatalities. But sooner this virus became dominant, the mortality rates were a lot better. So there is already a variety of variations we already seen. You might remember that there was a variation of the virus in Spain and Italy, and that hit it really hard, those countries, and mortality rate was humongously high. in those countries before. And that variation of the virus was also very important, which people perhaps forgotten about it. So mutations are not new. So UK COVID Genomics Consortium is feeding all the genetic surveillance found in the UK to the WHO genetic surveillance program, and the country is looking very closely how virus is changing its behavior and looking at mutations very closely. So this is the new mutant virus which you're talking about. This is the data from the genetics consortium in the UK, and you can see this pink shaded area here is a new mutation, and that's taking over and that's getting dominated in the population quite a lot. But still, majority of the spread out virus is this orange one, which is the original one. But there is a significant amount of this pink one coming up, which is being seen as more of an issue now. So if you look at the geographical distribution of the current disease, you can see the disease is more saturated in the south compared to the north. So south is still getting a more hit, and spike protein mutation is being linked to the infectivity of the virus. So it's been said because this particular mutation happened in the spike protein and the virus was found in the south region, and south region is having higher rates anyways. So they have a correlation saying this virus spreads fast. Now, spike protein mutation is linked to how virus attaches to the ACE receptor in your airways. So there's a direct correlation there. But the evidence is not really scientifically proven yet. And some scientists are saying it's also because of the human behavior and the natural infection rates in those regions. For example, in the south, as I've explained earlier, that the lockdown restrictions were at the tier 2. In the north, we have always been either in a national lockdown or a higher tier restrictions. So if a region is spreading the virus faster because of the human behavior, then a new variation or new variant will also spread fast. So scientifically, it's still being investigated whether this is really linked to the mutation or it's a result of the human behavior. The second issue is whether the new variation causes more deaths. That's not known yet. And although some mutations are in the spike protein in the areas and the deletion of certain genes suggesting that the virus may be more lethal, but again, it's a theory. It's not yet proven. There is another question about effectiveness of existing vaccine and the prevention measures, as you've asked. So the question is whether the existing vaccine will work against the variant or not. And as I've explained you how the vaccines work in my previous questions, so that's very important because the way the vaccine works, either you are producing spike proteins by your body cells, or you are using spike proteins to infect into your body and body responding to the immune response. If the spike protein changes genetically, it may change the immune response, and your immune system might see it either as a completely different virus and may not react to it. But the way the vaccines are designed, they target different targets, binding sites on the spike protein. So they're not just relying on one segment of the spike protein. So if a spike protein is changed on this side and not on the other side, then you would retain some of the immunogenicity of the vaccine, and you could have that kind of ability of the vaccine to provide immunity against the virus. So if you look at the spike protein here, you've got, it's a very complex protein. There are various parts of the protein which are going into mutation, but the whole protein is not changed. So depending on what your target in the vaccine are, you could predict that. So there is a group in UK called NervTech, which advises government on these kind of viruses and threats. And what they've done, on Friday, they had a meeting and they've initiated some tests, and they've taken some serum and plasma from vaccinated individuals, and they're trying to check in the laboratory if whether the antibodies produced as a result of the vaccine can neutralize the new variant or not. And that data will be out next week, very quickly. And we will know for sure whether the vaccine is working or not. So we'll get a definitive answer very soon. So in terms of the prevention measures, it's the same prevention measures. You need to follow the same guidelines as you have been doing so far. So social distancing, wearing masks, hand and oral hygiene, and all those precautions would still apply. So back to you, Izhar Sahab.
सवाल कर ले वो जर्नलिस्ट का क्या नाम है We have another 10 to 15 minutes. And here's a question coming from Vikar Bhatti Saab. He is a Pakistani health journalist and he wants to know your opinion on the repeat infection with COVID-19. Are they happening? If yes, can happen to all people?
It's a very important question, and people has been asking this quite a lot since the pandemic started. And my response to this is to look at it a bit more again scientific perspective. So short answer is repeat infections are happening. Yes, they are. It's true. Now the follow-on question is why they are happening. If I got the virus, the theory suggests I should have got the immunity and I should not get the virus again. So if you try to understand what I've explained to you earlier in my lecture and answers today about the flu virus vaccination program and how the viruses mutate and then produce the immune response, because virus is changing so rapidly that your immune response now depends on the constituent nature of the virus. So if the virus has slightly changed and your body has produced enough immunity against the previous infection, you will retain that immunity. Even if the antibody level goes down, your cellular response will still be there. The cellular response would mean that your border force, like say, for example, if you have a border security at your border and then the enemy attacks, the border security will try to diffuse the threat first. So those border security are in your nasal mucosa or oropharynx in this region. And those cellular immunity will tackle the virus first. So if your blood level of antibodies are going down, your cellular immunity will still be there. They will recognize the virus and they will try to neutralize it. And if the body needs, the body will produce more antibodies later. So not everybody is in danger who has been infected before. And many people will retain immunity to fight off the second infection. But if the virus mutates significantly, if the variation is so magnificent that your immune system now doesn't recognize the virus anymore, and it's a completely different virus. In that, like for example, SARS-CoV-1 to SARS-CoV-2, that's a huge change in the virus. So if the virus really changes quite a lot, then your produced antibodies wouldn't work. And maybe your vaccination wouldn't work either because virus has changed significantly from the previous version. And that could happen. So repeat infections are likely. The other explanation of repeat infection is sometimes people only get a very small load of the virus. So the explanations I've given so far are viral related explanations. There is more factors, which is human being related factors. For example, if I got a very mild disease and I didn't really get even symptoms, I was asymptomatic. Now my body did not see this as a threat. So my body not going to spend a lot of my valuable resources in producing millions of antibodies against the virus. Whose body didn't feel like there is a need. If somebody got a very minor illness, their body will produce some immunity. If somebody would have got very high disease, hospitalized, life-threatening situation, recovered, that person will have a very high amount of antibodies in them, and body will try to keep it for longer because body has got a life-threatening situation. So our own human behavior or body's immune response will dictate how much immunity we produce and then how much we get the protection for the future. So repeat infection cases are likely, particularly if virus changes quite a lot. If virus doesn't change quite a lot, then repeat infection cases might not be very frequent.
So another question is from Hassan Jamal Saab, and he's asking, common man wants to know how it took so long to get vaccine, and when commonly doctors were saying to use sanitizer and washing hands will save the person from virus. Will COVID-19 will remain with us for a long time? And with this, I will also add this question from Faraz Ali Saab. Will one vaccine will be enough, or new one will be required annually?
It's a very interesting question. regarding the when coronavirus will finish and when the pandemic will end, और जो है हमारी कब इससे जान छूटेगी और कितना अरसा लगेगा इस वायरस से जान छुड़ाने में. I've already gone in a lot more detail in my talk earlier and explained ye. So I've already explained that bit of the question. Now, with regard to the doctor's instructions about hand sanitizers and hygiene, that's prime. That's most important. So the virus entry points to your body is through your nose, through your eyes, through your mouth, and most often we keep touching our face quite frequently, and this is how we contaminate ourselves. So if you don't look after your hand hygiene, potentially you are catching the virus, because this is an airborne virus. You are breathing it from people, so social distancing measures is important, and wearing mask and barriers or kind of face protection, important, very important. Now, when it comes to the hand sanitizers, there was a craze about hand sanitizers in the past in the country, and people were going really crazy about buying these hand sanitizers. So hand sanitizers are good, but not all hand sanitizers are good. There's a lot of problems about quality of hand sanitizers. I can share some references about hand sanitizers on my screen if you wanted to know a bit more about it and read on that note later. But the hand hygiene is very important, and you cannot neglect the hand hygiene measures. So there is a reference here about the hand sanitizers, the poor quality available in the market, and we did a lot of research about how to formulate them and how to make it available by the industry. So we have disclosed the recipe and full manufacturing methods in the open source. So if anyone want to prepare quality hand sanitizers, the formula is there for the local industry to come up with a shortage. And the poor quality hand sanitizers, the methanol contamination, and all those issues, are there in the market. The wrong grade of alcohol has been used because there was a supply chain shortage, and people have used industrial spirits around that, and there's a lot of problems. So don't really have a fuss about hand sanitizers, because washing your hands is more superior to hand sanitizers in the research. So if you have hand washing facilities, please wash your hands using any soap. You don't have to really buy a very specific and branded and kind of a specialized antiviral soap. No, all soaps will disrupt the capsid around the viral membrane. The lipid bilayer can be broken down by detergents in the soap. So that can be broken down. That's scientifically proven. Just wash your hands, and that's the best way. If you're working in a situation where you can't wash your hands, or you can only wash 2-3 times in a day and you're stuck, or you're working in a hospital or in a situation where you're seen in the front line as a potential threat, then hand sanitizers is your best way, to get rid of the contamination in the time being. But even those who are using hand sanitizers because of they don't have a hand wash facility, I would say take breaks, go to the washroom, wash your hands, wash your face. And some of the religious practices, like our Islamic practices, will help you as well. Stay in ablution, stay in wudu, is part of our normal hygiene practices. Will keep you away from the virus. So one vaccine is enough. Last question was, again, I've already explained that in a lot more detail. That Ebola virus vaccine tells us that the immunity lasts for about 6 months or so and then sharply goes down. So, but the cellular immunity stays there. So your body's memory cells, immune cells, can recognize the virus. So chances are that you might keep it longer. But maybe if you don't, maybe there is another booster dose available in 6 months' time, people who have injected it. So there are 2 courses of vaccinations now, but with more data coming in, if there was a 3rd course required, that will be provided to maintain the immunity. And also, if the virus changed, maybe the 3rd dose will have a slightly different genetic code to give you extended version of immunity for the potential new variants. So that's not a problem at all. The vaccines can come up, and it is also possible that in our annual vaccination program, we have quadrivalent vaccines. So they've got 4 different flu viruses in our annual vaccination program. We can add a 5th one to cover the COVID in the annual surveillance program. It's a possibility. It's an easy way because people are already taking it annually in many countries. So there are various ways to look at this, and there's nothing to be worried. Although I've painted a very dark picture in the beginning saying this pandemic comes around, virus keeps changing, it keeps coming. But the good side is pandemic always goes down, virus keeps mutating, and often mutation is adaptation to the host body. Yeah. So our body is also trying to adopt the virus. Virus cannot control their genetic code like bacteria. So remember one thing, viruses are different. They do not control their genetic code. Whatever the mutations are happening are either happening by chance or they are happening by the influence of our own body. So some of the mutations are in our favor and we are adopting the virus to make it our ecosystem. So we no more react to it. Yeah. So there is a positive side to the story. We have got a vaccination program. We have got annual immunization schemes already in some countries, and we can tackle it. And from looking at the previous pandemics, we know that this pandemic will die. Eventually, our body immune system will overcome it. Over to you, Zaza.
Okay. Next question is, can hyperimmune plasma therapy be as effective as the inactivated vaccine? This question is from Mirza Afan Beg.
It's a very complex question, and the simple answer is difficult. But I would say, if I would try to give a simple answer, my answer would be no, because the immunity acquired actively is acquired by your own body. Your own body produces them. That's more uh, memorized by your immune system because it's produced by you. Your body is produced it naturally, seeing a potential threat. And that immunity, active immunity, is always superior to the passive immunity. Passive immunity is always an option for those people because not everybody can have active immunity. Now, if you talk about vaccine, सब लोग वैक्सीन नहीं लगा सकते हैं, सही है? बहुत से लोगों में इम्यून सिस्टम ठीक नहीं है, किसी को HIV है, किसी को एड्स है, कोई इम्यूनो कम्प्रोमाइज है, किसी का ऑर्गन ट्रांसप्लांट हुआ है, सब लोग नहीं वैक्सीन लगा सकेंगे. There are lots of contraindications within the population. So मैं यही suggest करूंगा, speak to your doctor, speak to your pharmacist before you sign up for any vaccination program. तो वो लोग क्या करेंगे? वो बीमारी से मर तो नहीं जाएंगे. So we need to protect them as well. So passive immunization is for those who cannot have the active immunity, but they are dying with the disease. If they get the infection, then we can transfer passive immunity to them. But passive immunity comes with challenge. हमने बहुत से पेशेंट्स के अंदर देखा इम्यूनिटी बनी नहीं, एंटीबॉडीज बने नहीं, दे रिकवर हो गए, देयर इज नो एंटीबॉडी लेवल. दोज हु प्रोड्यूस एंटीबॉडीज, द एंटीबॉडी लेवल डाउन, डिक्रीज हो गया. अब उससे आप डोनेशन भी लेंगे तो कोई फायदा नहीं है. सो प्यूरिफिकेशन प्रोसेस में इश्यूज है. हाउ वुड यू प्यूरिफाई the plasma to that extent that there is no contamination, there is no other pathogenic ingredients in there, कोई और communicable diseases पास नहीं हो जाएंगी, जो कि कॉमन प्रॉब्लम है. जितनी भी ब्लड ट्रांसफ्यूजन प्रोडक्ट्स हैं मार्केट के अंदर, historically they have got transfusion problems. तो allergic reaction, anaphylaxis or passing infections and body's reactivity to those plasma products, because एक इंसान का दूसरे इंसान से मैच 100% नहीं होता, वो हमेशा इसमें रिस्क रहता है. तो पैसिव इम्यूनाइजेशन अप्रोचेस दुनिया में अब बहुत पुरानी हो चुकी हैं, लोग उसको प्रेफर नहीं करते हैं. Recombinant genetic engineering approach is more modern, they're more safer, and you can calculate what you are giving in more precisely. So they are more powerful. But unfortunately, not everybody can have a vaccine. So passive immunization will be there. But passive immunization में भी एक और safer process है, जो कि कहलाता है monoclonal antibodies का. एंड मोनोक्लोनल एंटीबॉडीज जो है, मैं आपको एक स्लाइड दिखाता हूँ, होपफुली अगर मुझे अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन में मिल जाती है. यस, व्हिच विल गिव यू एन ओवरऑल kind of a summary of how that works. So AstraZeneca is one of the biggest player in these monoclonal antibodies. इसके अंदर हम क्या करते हैं कि लेबोरेटरी में इंजीनियर करते हैं एंटीबॉडी को, बजाय किसी रिकवर्ड पेशेंट के प्लाज्मा से लेने के. हम लेबोरेटरी में एंटीबॉडी को इंजीनियर करते हैं और ये एंटीबॉडी जाके वायरस को न्यूट्रलाइज करती है. तो एस्ट्राजेनेका के पास थाउजेंड्स ऑफ एंटीबॉडीज की डेटाबेस मौजूद है, जिसमें उन्होंने क्या किया है कि मैचिंग के जरिए SARS-CoV-2 से आइडेंटिफाई किए कौन सी एंटीबॉडीज जो हैं वो ऐसी हैं जो वायरस से बाइंड करके उसको न्यूट्रलाइज कर सकती हैं, और उन्होंने इसकी कॉकटेल तैयार की है जो कि क्लिनिकल ट्रायल्स में फेज 3 में मौजूद है. ये एक ऐसी पैसिव इम्यूनिटी है जो लैब इंजीनियर्ड है, हाईली प्यूरिफाइड है और वेरी सिलेक्टिव टू SARS-CoV-2 है. तो जो लोग इससे ट्रीट नहीं हो सकते हैं, जो बीमारी से स्ट्रगल कर रहे हैं, which are at the verge of dying from the disease, और those who can never be vaccinated, जो अगर करेंगे भी तो इम्यूनिटी बनेगी नहीं, इम्यूनो कॉम्प्रोमाइज हैं या हाइपर एक्टिव हैं, उनको सीवियर एडवर्स रिएक्शन का खतरा है, उनको ये जो मोनोक्लोनल एंटीबॉडी की कॉकटेल है, ये पैसिव इम्यूनिटी है, ये पैसिव वे ऑफ इम्यूनाइजेशन हेल्प करेगा. बट चूंकि फर्स्ट राउंड ऑफ पैंडेमिक में हमारे पास बहुत सी चीजें नहीं थी, तो कन्वलेसेंट प्लाज्मा ने और ये जो प्यूरिफाइड IgGs हैं रिकवर्ड पेशेंट से, इन्होंने कुछ लोगों को रिकवर किया, कुछ लोगों को सपोर्ट प्रोवाइड की, सो नो डाउट अबाउट इट, बट इट्स अ वेरी ओल्ड वे ऑफ डीलिंग विद इट, एंड इसके बहुत सारे इश्यूज हैं, और जो मॉडर्न टेक्निक्स है वो डेफिनेटली सुपीरियर है इस टेक्निक से, और सेफ है और मोर इफेक्टिव भी है.
लास्ट क्वेश्चन
जी
और
साहब.
लास्ट एडवाइस, और वो ये है कि आपकी पाकिस्तान की फार्मा इंडस्ट्री के लिए, पाकिस्तान की गवर्नमेंट के लिए और पाकिस्तान के लोगों के लिए क्या एडवाइस है?
Thank you very much, Izaz sahab, for asking me this question. This is something which is at the core of our heart, and we always have a passion for Pakistan, and our heart always beats and cries for Pakistan, particularly in the situation where Pakistan is going through the hard time. तो मेरा मैसेज पाकिस्तान के लिए सबसे पहला मैसेज ये है कि कम्युनिटी को एजुकेट करें, अपने आसपास के लोगों को एजुकेट करें. कोरोना वायरस के हवाले से बहुत से मिथ्स और बहुत से प्रोपेगेंडास चल रहे हैं, बहुत सी मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन चल रही है, और PPMA का और तमाम हेल्थ केयर प्रोफेशनल्स और बॉडीज का एक किरदार है एजुकेशन ऑफ कम्युनिटी के लिए, और हम सब कोशिश कर रहे हैं अपना जितना किरदार अदा कर सकते हैं हम करें. जैसे हमने पहले एक दूसरे डिफरेंट प्लेटफॉर्म से पब्लिक के लिए एजुकेशन प्रोग्राम्स अरेंज किए, काफ़ी एपिसोड उर्दू में भी किए लोगों को समझाने के लिए आसान ज़बान में कि वायरस क्या है, इम्यूनिटी क्या है, कैसे फैल रहा है, मिथ्स को वो करें. तो प्लीज़ एजुकेशन प्रोग्राम्स पे ध्यान दें. तमाम हेल्थ केयर प्रोफेशनल का, वेदर वो फार्मेसी के हों, नर्सिंग के हों, मेडिकल के हों, फ्रंट लाइन वर्कर्स हों, R&D में हों, सबका फ़र्ज़ है कि एजुकेशन कैंपेन्स में पार्टिसिपेट करें और कंप्लाइंस को बढ़ाएं. जो प्रिकॉशनरी SOPs हैं उनको बढ़ाने में कोशिश करें. दूसरा, कोविड वैक्सीन के हवाले से अवेयरनेस पैदा करें, बताएं कि जेन्युइन इश्यूज क्या हैं वैक्सीन के. तमाम वैक्सीन एक जैसी नहीं है, और तमाम इश्यूज जो वैक्सीन से पैदा हो रहे हैं, जो मिथ्स और जो लोगों के दिलों में जो प्रोपेगेंडा और एंटी वैक्स चीजें आ रही हैं, वो बेसलेस नहीं है. उसके पीछे कोई ना कोई फैक्ट होता है जिसको मैनिपुलेट किया जाता है. तो हर चीज को डिसमिस ना कर दें, उनको एक्सप्लेन करें कि ये मिथ कहाँ से आया, इसके पीछे वजह क्या है, इसमें साइंस क्या है, इसमें सच्चाई क्या है, और फिर ये कैसे मिथ में कन्वर्ट हो गया. तो हर चीज को डिसमिस कर देंगे तो लोग कभी बिलीव नहीं करते हैं. उनको ऑनेस्टली होके बताएं, और खास तौर पे जो लिमिटेशन है वैक्सीन के अंदर उसके लिए भी ओपनली बात करें, बैलेंस करके. तो ओपनली बात करने से मतलब ये कि जैसे मैंने बताया कि 95% एफिकेसी, रियल वर्ल्ड एफिकेसी बहुत कम होगी, हार्डली. अगर 50-60% भी हो गई तो आई विल बी वेरी हैप्पी. वैक्सीन इज स्टिल गुड. मैसेजेस के वैक्सीन अभी भी गुड है, बट ओवर प्रोपेगेंडा या ओवर पब्लिसिटी भी नहीं करनी चाहिए जिससे पब्लिक का कॉन्फिडेंस डाउन होता है. तो लोगों को बताएं कि एफिकेसी रियलिस्टिकली क्या होगी, किन में वैक्सीन काम करेगी, किन में नहीं करेगी, कहाँ साइड इफेक्ट आएंगे, कहाँ नहीं आएंगे. लेकिन वैक्सीन भी इतनी 5-6 किस्मों की हमारे पास है. तो पॉपुलेशन में देयर विल बी पीपल हु माइट बी बेटर ऑफ ऑन वन टाइप ऑफ वैक्सीन, द अदर पीपल माइट बी बेटर ऑफ विद सम अदर टाइप ऑफ वैक्सीन. तो रिस्क वर्सेस बेनिफिट देखते हुए केस टू केस बेसिस पे पेशेंट को हम गाइड करें और बताएं आपके लिए ये वैक्सीन सूटेबल है, आपके लिए ये वैक्सीन सूटेबल है, आपके लिए इन दोनों में से दोनों सूटेबल है, आप कोई भी लगवा सकते हैं, या आपके लिए कोई भी सूटेबल नहीं है, आप लगवा ही नहीं सकते, आपके लिए डेंजरस है. तो ये हमें केस टू केस रिव्यू करना होगा उनकी मेडिकल हिस्ट्री देख के. तो एजुकेट करें, वैक्सीन की अपटेक को बढ़ाएं. जितनी हमारी हर्ड इम्यूनिटी पैदा होगी, जितनी हम एक्टिव और पैसिव इम्यूनिटी एक्वायर करेंगे, इस मसले से निकलेंगे. दूसरा, फार्मा इंडस्ट्री के लिए एक ये रिक्वेस्ट है कि एंटीवायरल थेरेपेटिक्स के ऊपर जो है थोड़ा इन्वेस्ट करने की ज़रूरत है पाकिस्तान में. हमने रिसेंटली देखा कि फार्मा इंडस्ट्री ने बेहतरीन रिस्पॉन्ड किया और इम्पोर्टेड मेडिसिन को पाकिस्तान में लेके आने के लिए उन्होंने बहुत हाई पैमाने पर और बहुत रैपिडली दे ट्राई टू ब्रिंग इन सम प्रोडक्ट्स इनटू पाकिस्तान टू प्रोवाइड सम बेटर केयर एंड ट्रीटमेंट फॉर कोविड-19. एंड आई वुड रिकमेंड कि कुछ और एंटीवायरल मेडिकेशंस हैं जो कि पर्टिकुलरली ओरल एंटीवायरल प्रोडक्ट्स हैं. ख़ास तौर पे जैसे हमारे पास जो है फेविपिराविर है या मोलनुपिराविर है, जो कि यूएसए की यूनिवर्सिटी से स्पिन ऑफ हुई है. उसने फेरिस्ट के अंदर जो विदिन 24 आवर्स ट्रांसमिशन को स्टॉप कर दिया है. कोविड की 6 क्लिनिकल ट्रायल्स इस वक्त करंटली चल रही हैं उस पर्टिकुलर एंटीवायरल के ऊपर. तो वो एंटीवायरल्स ओरली अवेलेबल हैं, मास लेवल पे यूज हो सकती हैं अगर इफेक्टिव हुई तो अभी से उनको पाइपलाइन में लाने की कोशिश करें गवर्नमेंट ऑफ पाकिस्तान के साथ अपनी बात करके, और प्रोएक्टिव रहें. ऐसा ना करें कि जो हो गया फिर उसको लाएं, पहले से नजर रखें, देखें, सर्विलेंस करें, साइंटिफिक लिटरेचर को देखें कि कौन सी लाइकली प्रोडक्ट्स हैं जो आ रही हैं ऑलरेडी, बिल्कुल वर्ड्स पर है, अनाउंस नहीं हुई है, प्रेस में नहीं है, बट साइंटिफिकली वी नो कि दे विल वर्क, दे माइट वर्क इन विद हाई प्रोबेबिलिटी, उनको देखें। और गवर्नमेंट ऑलरेडी आई हैव हर्ड के negotiating with many vaccine suppliers, so government of Pakistan is trying to do their best from their side, वो अपनी तरफ से पूरी कोशिश कर रही है, and they will get some vaccines in Pakistan। तो मैसेज यही है कि एक वैक्सीन पे निशान ना करें, गवर्नमेंट के लिए भी, कि ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड द मैकेनिज्म बिहाइंड वैक्सीन, कौन सी वैक्सीन पॉपुलेशन के लिए सूटेबल होगी, कौन सी वैक्सीन इम्यूनोजेनिक लोगों के लिए, एक सेलेक्टिव पॉपुलेशन ग्रुप के लिए जो ज़्यादा सूटेबल होगी, उस हिसाब से इसको साइंटिफिकली देखें, सिर्फ स्टोरेज कंडीशंस, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन पे ना देखें, लॉजिस्टिक्स अपनी जगह इंपॉर्टेंट है, बट वैक्सीन की साइंस और इसका मैकेनिज्म भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। देखें कि पाकिस्तान में किस पॉपुलेशन ग्रुप के लोग मौजूद हैं और उनको किस किस्म की वैक्सीन की ज़रूरत पड़ सकती है, और उसमें पार्टनरशिप करें। और फार्मास्यूटिकल इंडस्ट्री का इसमें बड़ा रोल है कि वो वैक्सीन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के अंदर खास तौर पर पाकिस्तान में गवर्नमेंट के साथ मिलकर कोई काम करने की कोशिश करें कि अगर ये वैक्सीन हम पाकिस्तान में लोकली मैन्युफैक्चर कर सके, तो सिर्फ कोविड के लिए नहीं, वैक्सीन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग की जो टेक्नोलॉजी है, दैट विल प्रोटेक्ट पाकिस्तान फार्मास्यूटिकल इंडस्ट्री फॉर द फ्यूचर थ्रेट्स। पाकिस्तान फार्मास्यूटिकल इंडस्ट्री इज ए बिग एसेट टू पाकिस्तान, ये बहुत बड़ा एसेट है, कौमी असासा है, और ये खतरे में है क्योंकि हमारी इंडस्ट्री जो है मॉडर्न फार्मास्यूटिकल प्रोडक्ट्स पे अभी तक नहीं अडॉप्ट हो सकी है, अनफॉर्चुनेटली। तो जो कल की दवाइयां हैं वो जेनेटिक प्रोडक्ट्स हैं, जेनेटिक डिजीज, रेयर मेडिसिन है, डीएनए बेस्ड मेडिसिन है, एमआरएनए बेस्ड मेडिसिन है, प्रोटीन थेरापेटिक्स है, बायोलॉजिकल प्रोडक्ट्स हैं, और ये प्रोडक्ट्स हम नहीं बना रहे इस वक्त भी, बायोलॉजिकल प्रोडक्ट्स हम नहीं बना रहे, बायोबेटर्स नहीं बना रहे, बायोसिमिलर्स नहीं बना रहे, जिसकी वजह से इंडस्ट्री का एक्सपोर्ट इफेक्ट हो रहा है और इंडस्ट्री का सर्वाइवल खतरे में। तो अगर इंडस्ट्री इस कोरोना वायरस की वजह से ही कम अज कम वैक्सीन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग की तरफ आती है, तो उनका पहला कदम होगा कि वो आइंदा आने वाले ज़माने की जो फ्यूचर मेडिसिन हैं उनको बनाने की कैपेबिलिटी अपने अंदर पैदा करें और पाकिस्तान को और सेल्फ रिलायंट भी बनाएं, प्लस इकोनॉमिक एडवांटेज भी है क्योंकि ये प्रोडक्ट्स हम बनाएंगे, जब हम बायोलॉजिकल प्रोडक्ट्स बनाएंगे, बायोफार्मास्यूटिकल प्रोडक्ट्स बनाएंगे, तो पाकिस्तान की जो एक्सपोर्ट अब नहीं हो रही है मेडिसिन मुख्तलिफ जगहों पे, वो एक्सपोर्ट होना शुरू होगी क्योंकि ये प्रोडक्ट बहुत एक्सपेंसिव है। Internationally, they're very expensive. There's a big market for those products. And if you tap into these areas, this will be the future of tomorrow's products anyways. तो ये मेरा जो है आखिरी मैसेज है, और चूंकि ये आखिरी सवाल था तो मैं एंड में कुछ लोगों का शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहूँगा, ख़ास तौर पर पीपीएमए का जिन्होंने ये फोरम प्रोवाइड किया, हारून साहब का, कैसर साहब का जिन्होंने इनवाइट किया, इज़ार साहब का डाउ यूनिवर्सिटी के प्लेटफॉर्म से जिन्होंने इसको प्रोग्राम को ऑर्गेनाइज किया और मॉडरेट किया, सवालात पूछे, और मेरे कुलीग हडर्सफील्ड यूनिवर्सिटी में particularly डॉक्टर हसन एंड खाओ फ्रॉम Malaysia, who has been instrumental in synthesizing evidence for COVID as part of our Huddersfield group, and lots of other collaborators across the world जिनके साथ मिलके हमने बहुत बेतहाशा एविडेंस सिंथेसिस के काम किए और बहुत ज़्यादा एविडेंस पब्लिश किया ड्यूरिंग लॉकडाउन पीरियड एंड कोविड regarding safe use of medications. I would like to thank everybody who somehow in any means contributed to this campaign and helped us and collaborated with us. Thank you everyone and thank you all of you जो आज आप हमारे साथ मौजूद रहे, हमें सुना और आज का प्रोग्राम अटेंड किया, क्वेश्चंस पूछे, इसको मोर इंटरेक्टिव बनाया। आप तमाम का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, हामिद साहब। अब मैं नोट ऑफ थैंक्स डॉक्टर कैसर वही साहब, ओवर टू यू।
Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon, still afternoon. Dr. Hamid Merchant, it's always been good to hear about good things from you. I mean, as they say, yesterday I was only wise. After listening to your thought-provoking talk, I'm a wiser person from. Everybody is a wiser, gonna be a wiser person after listening to thought-provoking lecture or presentation. Uh, uh, my thanks to the Izar Saab, Dr. Izar, Harun Qasim, who has hosted this program today, Chairman of PPMA and the Executive Committee of PPMA, Uh, Thank you all and all. Thank, special thanks to the participants and those participants who have put valid questions so that we can you can answer them and we can learn more about the prevailing disease all over the world. Now with this COVID, there is another alarming situation is being evolving, and that is the mental health. Because of fear of COVID or getting infection and staying at home or in the hospital, what will happen next day, and the financial consequences being faced by the population of our world. Uh, and now I think that mental health and this COVID is going together along, and uh, the physician and the regulators need to work out how to balance between COVID-related issues and the mental-related issues all over the world. In Pakistan, because we live in Pakistan, uh, we don't recognize mental disease as a disease or mental problems are problems. Uh, Even the regulators, even the government of Pakistan, unfortunately doesn't understand that in Pakistan, 30% of the adult urban population is suffering from some sort of mental disease. And onset of COVID and fear of loss of job or loss of livelihood is creating more problems. I thank you, Dr. Hamid Machar, for giving insight regarding this ongoing pandemic. I thank you, Dr. Izhar again, Abu Qasim Sir, Chairman PPMA, and Farmihu for hosting this and providing us with samosas and chili. So, thank you, Hamid sir. Thank you very much.